For example, I studied philosophy for a while with some wonderful humans who, and they would say, "Oh, care is notoriously difficult to define." I said, "Well, that's not very helpful, is it?" And then I explored more deeply. Why do they find it so difficult? And it's almost like they've gotten stuck on the wrong question. The
Mm,
question they're trying to explore is, what is a human being? No, 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 no. The question should be, what is being human?
mm,
Because being human is not it's part of a phenomenon that is mortal, that is finite in its biological existence. But where the heck did it come from? All the ones that came before. And what is it part of? All the ones that are alive now. And what is it going to have the possibility of contributing to, since the topic here is legacy, all that will come thereafter? So what do you want to do with the rest of your life?
mm.
That question I wake up with every day. And I want to be smiling about it at the end of the day. And that means being concerned for, interested in, and caring about not just me, but the well-being of others as well.
Are you tired of being a bystander in your own life? Have you had enough of mediocre routine and crave real, tangible progress? Are you skeptical about quick fixes and want more than just a dime store motivation? If this is you, then buckle up for a transformative journey. Introducing the ABCs for Purposeful Living podcast. This isn't your average self-help talk. We're here to dismantle your problems down to their core and then hand you the building blocks of success to construct the life you've always dreamed of on your terms. Meet David Thirimer, an award-winning transformational coach, leadership expert, and keynote speaker. With nearly 2 decades of experience and having impacted over 400,000 lives across 42 countries, David is your guide to substantial and lasting change. He doesn't just preach, he combines cutting-edge research in psychology, neurology, and cognitive science with timeless principles of leadership and success, ensuring that your progress is well-rounded and lasting. Imagine what it would be like sitting in a transformational retreat, seminar, or coaching session that took you down to the very core of your life, beliefs, and habits, paving the way for a more intentional and powerful future. David Thirimer and his guests brings this experience to each podcast episode, aiming to empower you wherever you are, to seize control of your life and turn it into something truly extraordinary. It's time to stop coasting through life and start actively designing it. Are you ready? Then welcome to the ABCs of Purposeful Living podcast.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to another installment of our ABCs for Purposeful Living podcast. You know me, my name is David Thirimer, and I'm so happy to be back here with you again. And you're going to want to know the person who I've got with me on my show today, because we are going to be speaking to the living legend that is Ron Kaufman. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of insight into the background of this amazing human being, and then I'm going to ask him to introduce himself in his own words. But I'm going to read the bio for you because I want to do it justice so you can get a feel at how amazing this person I'm talking to is. So it is my pleasure, and when I say pleasure, I mean an absolute pleasure, to introduce our speaker for today, who is Mr. Ron Kaufman. And Ron is the world's leading educator and motivator for uplifting customer service and uplifting service cultures. He is the author of the book, Uplifting Service, and 14 other books on service, business, and inspiration. Ron is rated as one of the world's top 25 hot speakers by Speaker Magazine for his high energy and the high content of his presentations and speeches. He has been featured in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, and other TV programs around the world. And for 3 years in a row, Global Gurus has rated Ron the #1 customer service guru in the world. People listening today, Ron is a man on a mission to uplift the spirit and the quality of service and care everywhere in the world, including on our podcast today. And so put your hands together and let's give a warm podcast welcome to the man, the myth, the legend, Ron Kaufman. Ron, welcome.
Well, with an introduction like that, I have to add a rejoinder. Fortunately, I'm married to a wonderful woman who grew up on a farm in Western Australia,
Mm-hmm.
where her upbringing was real life.
Mm-hmm.
And she would refer to me as a legend in your own lunchbox.
So what does that mean?
Well, don't take yourself too seriously. Don't get caught up with your own hot pants. Just, live life and be grateful for every moment that you're alive and see
Yeah.
what you can do for other people to help them live a good life too.
Yeah, well, thank goodness for our wives. They certainly keep us grounded.
Yep.
Your wife sounds a lot like mine. But
I
tell us,
am grateful. Yes.
a bit about you, Ron. What makes you Ron Kaufman?
I'm a super, super fortunate guy just in some of the things that happened as I was growing up. So, for example, my dad's mom, my grandmother, she taught kindergarten for 40 years
Mm-hmm.
and she only had one child.
Mm-hmm.
He had five, so I have siblings, and we were like a private kindergarten. And so you can imagine when your kindergarten teacher, not just for the 1 year of kindergarten or 2 years, but like all your life, you've got a kindergarten teacher who's just constantly looking to encourage and emotionally support and educate and enable. That was grandma.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I was in high school, I got very involved in the sport of ultimate frisbee.
Hmm.
Now, if we were in person, you'd know I'm a bit small, so I'm not going to play the basketball or football team. But they let me play on the ultimate frisbee team. And I ended up becoming so passionate about it that I ended up taking it all over the world. In fact, I was involved in setting up Svenska Frisbee Förbund, which is the
Wow,
Swedish Frisbee Association, you would know being in Sweden,
that is
but
amazing.
also players associations, tournaments, festivals, family play days, clinics all over the world.
Wow.
And from that, I got involved in citizen diplomacy, taking groups of people from America to China and to the Soviet Union when it existed, bringing along American sports and toys as a way of getting people to not be afraid of each other and, in fact, connect. And then in my mid-30s, I was invited to come to Singapore for a week to work on a new national project to raise the quality of service in the whole nation.
Hmm.
Because the manufacturing was going to China and the back office was going to India. And so they had to come up the value chain. And I didn't know much about service, but I understood how do you get adults to learn something new?
Hmm.
And I understood that because I knew how to run a Frisbee festival. You got to get people in a good mood and you got to get them physically involved. So I started designing games to teach people some of the principles of improving the service experience for other people. And that became my 35-year career of traveling all over the world and having the privilege of meeting people in different cultures and helping companies and leaders and teams to improve the value that they create and the well-being of the people.
That's amazing. So 35 years, what's that been like?
Thank you for the question. I was on sometimes 100 flights a year.
Wow.
For 29 years. And I tell you the truth, David, I would not have stopped except for COVID.
Hmm.
I would have literally died on stage somewhere in the world. I was addicted. I would get into a hotel room and the first thing I would do is look at my calendar to figure out when am I leaving.
Wow.
And so jet lag was permanent. And the excitement was there, the thrill was there, the adrenaline was there, the joy was there, the intellectual provocation as a consultant, constantly learning about new industries and new cultures and new people and new situations. It was fascinating. But as far as physical well-being, COVID settled me down.
Hmm.
And so now my wife and I, we're back on the road. We just got back from 24 days in Spain, the United States, and Brazil.
Wow.
But we're doing it much more selectively than just impulsively.
Mm.
And, here on the other side of that COVID period and a bit older in my age at this point, I'm enjoying, not only just enjoying life, but really finding it richer and richer and more satisfying and fulfilling every day.
That sounds amazing. So tell us a little bit, what is it that motivates you so much? What are you passionate about? I mean, if people go to YouTube and see your videos, and I will encourage you to do so, just go to his website, go to YouTube, look up Ron. Ron's got so much amazing stuff out there on service, on care. And so what is it that kind of drove you to make that your pitch point?
And pitch point. It's that's an interesting expression, like as if it has a commercial, elevator speech or a
But it actually
tagline or
does
slogan.
it. It actually does it. It's like I can't imagine you walking into a room and saying, "So I'm here to talk to you guys about how to serve each other better." And people are like, "Okay,
Uh,
what's he doing here?"
yeah. So actually, like I'll walk into the room and I go, "Hi, who are you guys? Tell me about you. What are you facing? How is that going? What kind
Mm,
of mood are you in? What do you want to achieve? What's going on? What's got you frustrated? How can I help? Let's get going."
mm,
Right. So when people ask me, where do you get all that energy? Because I'm a bit of an energetic guy, I honestly answer, I get my energy from you. It is other human beings and being fascinated with how we humans are living life, realizing, and this came from grandma, that in every moment you could say something, you could do something, you could do a facial expression, a smile, a thumbs up, an acknowledgement that will simply brighten up that other person's day, even if it's just for a moment. And in doing that, oh boy, they get a perk. But you know what? The moment you make the choice to do that for another person, the energy is already coming through you.
mm.
So I get all that energy from being interested in other people.
So what is it about being interested in other people, and I guess just trying to um, build your life around uplifting service and around caring for others, and just trying to build a business that's based on good old-fashioned care and love and service? Because the topic for today we're going to talk about, for our listeners who haven't caught on yet, we're going to be talking about legacy because we're at the letter L. And so you might be wondering why we're coming at legacy, but when we sent out a poll and talked to a number of our listeners, a lot of people had this question about how do I build a legacy? Because we seem to be obsessed with this concept of our lives mattering. And we want our lives to matter not just at the end of our lives, but in the everyday. I mean, we're all about significance. We're all about leaving an impact. We're all about, I would like the things that we do to outlive me. And it seems that we tend to go about it in the wrong way. And so that's the reason why I was like, let's get the world's leading expert in, leadership and in service and in care to tell us about how building legacy is actually not that complicated. It's just the little things you do every day that really uplifts the people around you. So, Ron, in your opinion, talk to us about why is it that these good old fashioned values of service and care and love seem to be so foundational in actually building something that really makes a difference and really matters.
Mm, mm. And I'm just going to touch on one thing that you said there about the little things. It may be the little and the big things that you do, and it's also the things you choose not to do.
Mm,
So, for example, in my case, like everybody else in the world, at some point I had to figure out, how am I going to make a living?
mm,
What am I going to do that is going to create enough value in the world that I can get involved in this?
mm,
And what I was fortunate in the invitation to Singapore, that the topic happened to be service. If they were doing a leadership center today, I might be a leadership expert. A negotiating center, I could be a negotiation. A pricing center, I could be a pricing specialist. I
mm,
got lucky. It was service. And I asked them, what do you actually mean by service? And they couldn't give me a simple, clear answer that would apply in every industry: internal service,
mm,
external service, boardroom, frontline. So it took me about 10 years to write the following sentence:
mm,
service is taking action to create value for someone.
mm.
Okay, right. The moment you hear it, it makes sense.
It
That's what we're
does.
doing on the podcast right now. You and I are taking action, me to support your podcast to support your listeners, whatever it is that you do that someone else values, that's
Mm,
called service. If you value it, it's called self-service.
yeah.
Okay. So then you can start to build on that and go, well, what is the situation? Or
Mm,
what is it that the person you're serving, let's use the term customer, whether
mm,
it's a colleague or somebody external or a family member, the
mm,
recipient of your action, what is it that they value? Not what do you value? You know that thing about treat other people the way you'd like to be treated? No. Bad idea. They may not be like you.
Yeah.
You want to treat other people the way they want to be, which means your curiosity goes up, which means if you don't understand, your respect needs to go up so that you put yourself in a position of genuine, authentic curiosity, not judgment, and that you take action to create value for other people. Now, it's only been in the past 4 or 5 years that I've started to tackle the question, wait a minute now, what makes something valuable to someone else?
Exactly.
Right? And the answer to that, it seems, is when it contributes to someone's well-being. It could be their financial well-being, their emotional well-being, their physical well-being, their relational well-being, their cultural well-being. But if it contributes to their well-being, then they're going to say, yeah, that was valuable. Okay? Which now opened the door for me to start to work on, think about, write about, and now teach about what is care. Well, care is concern and commitment to some well-being, not just now, but also into the future. You got 5 kids, 1 on the way. You care about your kids, not just in the moment, but into the future.
Yeah.
If you care about your country or your music team or your sports club, you have concern, like I care, but also commitment, like take good care of someone's. Well, how do you take good care? You take action to create value that contributes to the well-being because you care and you're committed to the well-being. And so these two are so intimately linked that it's literally now opened up the next 2 decades of my life and given me a horizon for future teaching that I'm just beginning to do and enjoy.
That sounds amazing. So before you get into those 2 decades, I'd love to get a synopsis here for all of us listeners over here who are going to, I guess, experience your journey and follow you for hopefully the next 2 decades, because honestly, people need to be connected with you and the value that you have to offer. So put that into a nutshell for us, because it seems like such an easy concept to understand, but I think it's actually something that people tend to miss. So talk to me a little bit, give me an example of how that would work. For example, in a company that you're working with like a leader or someone who's in management with their team, like how would that work with actually understanding what brings value to them and how to be committed to that?
So I will do that as best I can, but let me step back first and say something about the time in which you and I are having this conversation. I mean, the time like in the course of human history.
Yeah.
Okay. We live in an era that I would describe as a culture of selfish calculation. Okay. You know, like how big is your bank account? What's your ranking? You know, when you said we're all striving for some kind of success or significance, but there's a way to measure it. Like, are you rated number 1 or number 2? Did you win the deal? How profitable? What's your margin? How's the bottom line?
How many
and
followers?
Then we build the clicks and likes and then we build with that various institutional practices. So then you end up with communities, and whether we're going to, you know, compete on LinkedIn or tweets or in the social media space, which many people now are consumed with today. You know, you want that hit of dopamine that comes from getting liked. Right?
Yeah.
And in business or in a government agency or in a nonprofit or even in a sports team, you're going to have these situations where some people are leaders. And then what does it mean to be a leader? If you're a leader in, let's say, a profit-focused organization and what you want is sales and you're responsible for top-line revenue, that may be what you care about. The world is changing. People are going, whoa, wait a minute. I'm living in an era of ecological catastrophe. I'm living in an era where the global inequalities and the tensions and the crises are, you know, they're in my face every day. How do I live a good life? Not just how do I score high?
Yeah.
Okay. So then that living of a good life means if you're a leader who cares, what does it mean to care about your customer? Not just give them what they value, but you're concerned and committed to their future well-being. You might be the one to say, you know, I know what it is that you've asked for here, but before I sell it to you or give you what you asked for, could I just check in on what's the background concern that you have? Or, you know, we've had a lot of people ask that question, And there's another question that you didn't ask, but that's often very located next to it. Let's explore that together. And there you are, opening up a space for authentic expression of concern and commitment for the well-being of the other. Now that takes customer service to a level of customer care, which probably means a higher level of trust from that customer, which is going to mean more loyalty with that customer. I mean, it's going to pay off. But the orientation was different. You weren't just hunting the payoff, you were actually seeking the well-being of the other human being. Now you do that with your colleagues. Then you do that with the communities in which your colleagues and your customers are coming from. Then you can start to actually look at it culturally. Like, what is that era in which we live, and how should I speak as a leader? Where might I put my free time? What am I going to devote myself to that will contribute to the well-being of others? Which, as we heard earlier, contributes to the well-being of myself. Rather than going me.
So what does it take to make that shift in every individual, especially being that it is so against the grain of the current culture that we're living in today?
Well, it may be, against components of that grain. Mm-hmm. But if we look, for example, at many religious traditions, there is that sense of being part of something, being part of a community, being part of a collective. Mm-hmm. And, there's a hashtag I like to use, which is I am we. Mm. Okay, so for example, I studied philosophy for a while with some wonderful humans who, and they would say, oh, care is notoriously difficult to define. I said, well, that's not very helpful, is it? And then I explored more deeply, why do they find it so difficult? And it's almost like they've gotten stuck on the wrong question. Mm. The question they're trying to explore is, what is a human being? No. The question should be, what is being human? Mm. Because being human is not A. It's part of a phenomenon that is mortal, that is finite in its biological existence. But where the heck did it come from? All the ones that came before. And what is it part of? All the ones that are alive now. And what is it going to have the possibility of contributing to, since the topic here is legacy, all that will come thereafter. So what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Mm. That question I wake up with every day. And I want to be smiling about it at the end of the day. And that means being concerned for, interested in, and caring about not just me, but the well-being of others as well.
I was reading an interesting article a couple of days back about anthropology and the study of ancient civilizations, and they were talking about how they identify which skeletons belong to those who were moving towards building a community. And they were showing the femur bone of someone whose leg who had broken, and it had been fused back together. And they said this is the beginning of a stabilized human society, because the people around him, who are also hunter-gatherers, have stopped long enough to bind up this person's leg, allow him to heal in a way that he can sufficiently get back into the community, and so he could survive. And the anthropologists were saying that this was the beginning of the transition from our hunter-gatherer days into actually being in community, because you didn't just abandon the weak ones along the wayside. You actually took them in, cared for them, and because of that, you actually started building these communities. And so everything that we have today in our communities that we built communally and that we've enjoyed goes back in some level to the person who stopped when their friend fell and said, I'm going to stop and care for this guy for a little bit. Another thing that they were talking about was the sitting together and eating of meals. It's like previously, it's like, no, I'm going to eat this food because I caught this or I grew this and this is only mine. Well, what's going to happen if you can't do that the next day? What if you can't do that the next time around? Instead, you share with those around you because you care for them. And then they, in turn, reciprocate that care. And eventually what you start doing is you start building this level of trust where everyone is looking out for the needs of everyone else. And in the short term, it's like, that's the dumbest thing to do. You're hungry. You've got a big piece of food. You've got a family to feed. Let them eat well, because you don't know where you're going to find food again. And that's the very short-term mentality. And it seems somehow we've kind of reverted back to that short-term mentality. Like, there's not enough pieces of this pie in this very individualistic age that we tend to live in. It's like, okay, this is mine. This is mine. If I don't have this, I don't have market share. I don't have a space on social media. It's like, okay, we're both in the same field. We can either be rivals. It's like, I'm not going to send people to Ron and Ron's not going to send people to me. And we shouldn't be doing stuff because, oh, we might compromise our legacies. But then that was a sure sign that our ancestors were going to die out. It's like, no, when they actually took that risk and said, hey, I'd rather invest more in our future as a community than my own hunger right now. Because I know if we share this between us, then there's a guarantee that when I've caught nothing, but my neighbor has, they'll share. And that takes a level of trust. That takes a level of, I guess, knowing that there's value. And I see you sighing when I say the word trust, because I think that's a major thing that we seem to be lacking today. So talk to us a bit more about, I guess, that trust element and also of looking into the future beyond our own current, I guess, self.
Yeah. And how rich this moment is for that conversation that you've framed and brought forward. We live in an era where the most pressing existential issues cannot be solved in a tribal manner. So there was a time when I trusted my tribe, but the others were coming to try to get my stuff. So we're going to defend and we're going to fight, we're going to attack. And okay. Today, you look at something like the pandemic experience. It didn't particularly look at your passport. It was a global phenomenon, right? Okay. Or obviously the one today in terms of climate and the need to shift something as fundamental as the way we generate power and consume energy and the lifestyles that we live. If we do not generate a narrative that says we really are in this together, okay, now we're asking for that to come forth on top of a countless generations historical accumulation that includes the documentation and in certain cases the celebration of distrust. We fought them, we won. Oh my God, that's history. That's a version of history. But we need to be able to write history with the actions that we take in the present. Now that can sound very idealistic and come on, get your act together here. But there are examples of various things that have been done and that are being worked on right now. And the question is, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? It doesn't mean you need to go to the United Nations. It doesn't need you need to become part of nuclear nonproliferation. Like we're talking at the neighborhood level. Do you know who's the older person down the street whose kids go to work every day and they literally sit in front of a television in a wheelchair? And if that's actually the case, do you have anything that you could potentially do about it? Like, yeah, my grandma's in the same situation. I wonder if I should introduce them to each other. And it'll be a bit of heavy lifting involved. And you'd have to go reach across and make say hello. But ultimately think about what would happen in terms of the community. And the sense of vibratory, like, well, what else becomes possible? So trust is a phenomenon that can also be built. It's not something you buy off the shelf. It's an accumulation of assessment over time that comes from certain interactions in which you did something that was capable, you did it sincerely, you actually cared about the outcome. And the next time I'm a little more open to the possibility of us doing something like that together again.
So that's a great definition of trust. But how do you get the confidence to demonstrate that kind of trust? Because a lot of times we tend to say like, okay, I would like the other person to make that first move. And I would like the other person to show that dependability. I would like the other person to show that sort of, for example, care towards me. And then I'll decide, okay, I'm confident enough to actually reach over that divide and respond to the trust because now what they have done has now given me confidence in trusting them. But how do you switch that over? Because if everyone's waiting for each other, then nothing happens.
Right. You're talking about essentially fundamental conversational competencies.
Okay.
In other words, what the heck does he mean by that? There are certain conversations we have that are about action. What time is this podcast? What technology are you going to use? Should I make sure the lighting is okay? What do you want to talk about? Conversations for action. But that only happened, David, because you and I preceded it with a conversation for possibilities. Hey, I'm doing this podcast. We're coming up on L. I heard about you. Would you be open to da 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 da? But that only came about, David, because you wanted to cultivate something. You wanted to create a podcast. You want to create an identity. You want to be a contributor. You told me the story about how that happened during COVID and how you brought it out into the world. Well, that desire of you to cultivate a podcast and an identity as a podcaster, et cetera, only came about because you wanted to get somewhere that COVID interrupted what you were going to. You used to be a guy who was in front of groups and workshops, and you didn't know how long it was going to be arrested for. So you wanted to figure out a way to do something else. But that only happened, that desire to navigate from here to there, because you were literally in a conversation for exploration in which you were saying maybe only to yourself, what the heck is going on around here? How are people living? How should I live my life? What have I been doing? Okay, now, I'd like to get over there. Okay, now how am I going to get over there? Well, I could do this. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, I could do it like this or like this or like this. Okay, so I just start reaching out, and here we are having a conversation for action. Okay, now imagine you want to cultivate trust with somebody where there's been distrust. What conversations do you need to have in order to bring both parties to a space in which it's even possible to begin to take the actions that will restore trust? We're going to have to start just in the opening of certain conversations that didn't exist before. For example, you know what? Okay, there's distrust between us. Before I want to go, I'd like to do something about it. I don't know what, but I think in order to just explore this better, I need to have a better understanding of how it all looks to you. Oh, there we are back with our curiosity and respect as an early step that can later lead to, and it's not assured. It's not guaranteed. You may mess it up and have to do it over and over again. You may be a beginner at it and need to go find a coach or take a workshop or do a lot of reading to start to even get some distinctions and some ideas of practices. But all of this is possible for humans because we are the creatures who have language as a generative, inventive phenomenon.
Yes.
We don't just growl at each other. We can actually offer a pause.
Yes. That's what I always tell my kids, that every time they would get angry. I was like, use your words. It's what separates us from the animals, our ability to go talk it out. So actually have a conversation.
And our ability to observe our moods and to curate them.
Absolutely.
Like when your kids get angry, how do they know yet? How do I recognize I'm in a state of anger? And what are the ways that I can intervene on myself to shift that? That means I need to be able to identify it. I need to recognize the consequences of it, make a conscious choice to shift it, and then go have a pizza or turn on the music or walk in nature or chill a moment or take a shower or, whatever it is. And that kind of really important human practices, kind of odd that they're not taught in school. Yeah. Along with most of what we're talking about right now.
Absolutely. So you brought up an incredible
educators like you.
And like you too, Ron. I mean, I would love everyone to sit and listen to you because you've got some incredible things to say. So you brought up one word that I would love to dig into a little bit, curiosity, because that's one thing that it's not just not taught in school, it's taught out of us in school. Like it's so funny how we just kill the curiosity of people. It's like we have no curiosity left as adults. So talk to us, like how do you, like in your experience, how do you maintain that curiosity or develop that curiosity?
Yeah. If you go to my website, and if anybody wants to, it's just my name, ronkaufman.com. And there's a tab that, drop down, says we believe. And it's got my values. Okay. And, the first couplet is curiosity and respect. In other words, what's going on around here? And I'm not here to judge it. Okay? Yeah. The next two, by the way, are gratitude and generosity. I mean, oh my gosh, look at all that we have. What can we do for other people? The next is care and commitment. Like, give a damn and do something about it. So if we go back to the curiosity and respect, it really caught fire when I was in university. And so I went from Connecticut, where I was a high schooler, and I went to Brown University. And after 2 years, I was frankly bored. I was a rascal. I knew how to get on the roof of every building on the campus. Like, what am I going to do now? So I went and I studied in Europe, in London,
Mm,
but I only studied for one semester and I took the spring off.
mm,
And I traveled all over Europe with duffel bags full of frisbees, starting players associations and teams and tournaments. And then while I was traveling, I found a school in the south of France.
mm.
And so for the next fall semester, I went to school in France and I took the spring off again. And I traveled all over Europe and I did festivals. And then I went back to Brown for my senior year and graduated. Well, during those two springtime semesters when I wasn't in school and the summers, I was already right at my early 20s and I was
Mm,
constantly traveling because it was less expensive to take a nighttime train from one city to another than to go get a hotel room because
mm,
I had a rail pass. So I was this kid who was literally crisscrossing all over the European continent, seeing different cultures,
mm.
practices, traditions, prejudices, bias, food styles, religions. How can you not be curious
Yeah.
when the world is changing so rapidly day by day? And because of Frisbee, people would bring me home.
Mm.
I slept on the couch. I ate with their families. And so that whole idea of also being respectful, I was just fortunate. I got it really.
So it seems like having interacted with a bunch of different people and traveled to so many different places, it's what kind of developed the curiosity even more. And
Mhm.
I think that's kind of interesting, but I think it's one thing I tell people a lot also. It's just like if you're feeling bored where you are, or you feel like you already know everything, just go and meet people. Go travel somewhere. Go get out and experience things. No, because there's actually I forget the name, and I'm kind of bad with names, but I forget
Okay.
the name of the person who discovered this. But he said that there is a certain fallacy. It's called the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. I think it was the name will come to me and I'll put in the description. But what he
Yeah.
said is that many times we use certain models to describe things. So
Yes.
like, we're trying to teach someone about something. We're like, okay, so here's the ball. And these are the properties of the ball. It's round, it's hard, it bounces. And so you can make a mental picture of that's what a ball is. And then you get the ball, you're like, oh, cool, that's a ball. You understand it. It's how we teach. And then what happens is you keep doing this. And by the way, I just remembered his name. His name is Alfred North Whitehead. So he does this thing called the fallacy of
Sure.
misplaced concreteness. So you can do it simple things like balls or it's a little bit
Anything.
more anything, but it's more
Yeah.
complicated when you're describing like an animal, for example. Like, okay, so it's big and it's got four legs and it's got a long nose. And you're like, okay, interesting. What doesn't come to mind is the exact picture. Now, of course, when you go and you see an elephant, you're like,
Hold
okay,
on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Let's just back off.
yeah,
It's not so much what doesn't come to mind as the exact picture as if there was an exact concrete picture. What doesn't come
exactly.
to mind is the phenomenon.
Hmm.
Lion
Yeah.
is the phenomenon ball and the
Yes.
games and the dynamic. And
Yes.
that's
Yes.
because what you're
Yes.
describing, that's this artificial concreteness, is the use of language as descriptive, as
Exactly.
if what is there exists,
Hmm.
rather than language is generative.
It is.
We use language to bring about.
Exactly. And so this is where he actually goes with his fallacy. He says where people run into real troubles is they become so attached to that concrete description that they dismiss the real thing because it doesn't match up with their description. And so if you always understand that, well, the people who follow this certain trend are like this, the people who live in this country are kind of like this,
Ooh,
or the people
ooh.
who work in these places are like this, or oh, the people from this sector never because they're like this. And then you actually go out and meet that person, be like, no, I don't want to hang out with this person because I already know what they're going to be like. I already know what this experience is going to be like. I already know what that country is going to represent. I already know what's going to happen at that meeting. And so people reject those opportunities out of complete sheer, I would say, false satiation of their curiosity because I already understand the model, but then they completely miss out on the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's a real fallacy because we're taking our words and we're using them to be descriptive and like, I've learned everything I need to know, so I don't need to go and explore. I don't need to understand anymore. And then we kind of get more and more trapped in this false understanding of I've already got everything kind of figured out. And we kind of feel bored because we haven't actually opened up those boxes and realized, whoa, I would have never expected that. I would never expected that this place would have been like the most incredible experience of my life. I never would have expected that meeting these people would just be completely transformative.
You know, a fundamental element of being human
Mm-hmm.
is the phenomenon of anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it's there, right? You know, at what age do you realize that great grandpa isn't alive anymore? That grandma passed away, that your own parents are mortal. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
guess what? One day it's coming for you too, right? Ain't
Yeah.
nobody talking about that very much. So the
Yeah.
little ones, you can be anything you want to be, go. And yet, always there in the background is this running towards death.
Mm-hmm.
So then, with such a fundamental existential source of potential anxiety, people are looking for ways to say, I got this. I know that. I can count on this. This is dependable. And that can, as you pointed out, include the way we assess other cultures,
Mm-hmm.
the way we anticipate the way other people are going to be rather than being open to and
Yeah.
curious about, or
Yeah.
even generatively encouraging of the possibility that there's a way of engaging that's different than what either of us knew was going to happen.
Yeah.
For example, the use of the word thinking in today's world has been incredibly debased. Oh, you know what I think? And then they blurt something at you. And they're not thinking at all.
Yeah.
Okay, just blurting out opinions with no reflection or so. What's a good example of thinking? When people come together and you're going to engage in a conversation, or you can do it with yourself, and you really don't know where this conversation is going to go,
Mm-hmm.
and you're open to engaging and exploring and dancing in language together, and you find yourself then really thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that can also be with a book, because a conversation with an author who's long passed, or with a text, is another form of, what's there and what I might bring to this already. And so that kind of curiosity, openness to new possibilities, willingness to set aside pre-existing conclusions, these are fundamental practices for well-being in today's world.
So talk to us a bit about that, because you did address it, that unfortunate but inevitable march towards the end that we're all going to face. So how do you live
Is
life?
it unfortunate?
Well, some people would call it that. I mean, you take
I mean, like
Noah.
right away, it's showing up like, oh, bad thing.
Exactly. No, but people like, Noah Yuval Harari, who's talking about the next step in human evolution is to completely remove the concept of death to make us live forever, because we as humans have, unfortunately, all have mortality waiting for us. So let's find a way to reverse that cycle.
Well, Professor Harari, who wrote his book Sapiens actually as a textbook for his history class at his university, right? He's a historian.
Yeah.
Not a futurist. And yet his second book, Homo Deus, was about the future. And
exactly.
I people say to me, what do you think? I say his first book was fabulous, Sapiens. And his third book, 21 Rules for the 21st Century, is also a really nice, piece of work. Homo Deus, if you like his writing style and you want a point of view, okay. But I'm not sure that I looked to this historian to tell me about the future of humanity.
Yeah. Now, my son brought it back as required summer reading, and he's like, this is really difficult. I was like, yep.
Which one did he bring back?
Homo Deus.
Homo Deus, yeah.
Yeah. So we had done the Sapiens together. So he's like, oh, this would be an interesting part two. And he's like, it's nothing like part one. But okay, so let's put aside the unfortunate, although we believe that some people do believe that it is unfortunate. Talk to us a little bit about that inevitable walk towards the end and how it frames our lives and just what we should do with that sort of existential knowledge.
Yeah, that kind of reality.
Yeah.
Right. So then suddenly every moment and every breath becomes a bit more precious. Because, right, there's that whole scarcity effect that exists in life. And we tend to say, oh, just live longer. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to sleep well. Maybe this disease of death is going to get solved in my lifetime and I can live forever. Unlikely.
Mhm.
So then what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Becomes a really probing and important question.
Mhm.
And part of that has to do with where one is in life. So if you're a young person, you're listening to this, you're 28, you're 32, you're 36, maybe you just got married and got one kid, you're aiming for the promotion, you're starting to accumulate some money, you want to buy a house. I mean, that is exactly what you should be doing at that point in life. So if you're in that, second 28 years, if you will, if you're younger and you're listening to this, God bless you, because you're getting into it really young. All right. I mean, the first 28 years, you're trying to figure out, how does this thing called life work?
Mhm.
What is power? Who do you trust? What goes on? What mistakes do people make? Like that. But between like 30 and you get up to the mid 50s, it's family, security, identity, power, competence, expertise, contribution. I mean, go, go, go. That's what your life is about. When you get to the next stage of life, you've been there, done that stuff. I'm not saying it's not important, but what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Mhm.
And that real sense of, maybe that's when people think about legacy, but it can also be like, how do I contribute?
Mhm.
How do I mentor more and maybe make less? Who can I be a teacher to? Rather than a hero. And really the focus becomes contributing to the well-being of others in the community. And it could even be like a historic community that's going to be after you pass.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it has to be the people across the street or the people at your institution or like that. It could be something like, in my case, I know that there's a book in me about care.
Mhm.
I know it. I mean, I've been working on it. I've got the structure for it. I got the name for it. I haven't put my attention into writing it yet, but it'll be interesting because in writing that book, it won't be the same as when I wrote Uplifting Service.
Mhm.
Uplifting Service had a purpose, New York Times bestseller, get it out there, let explain to clients what this is and how it works. Careology, which is the title of the book, it's a very different undertaking to help human beings pause and think more reflectively about what is this thing called care?
Yeah.
And how do we embrace it at any stage of our life?
So talk to us about contribution, because I love that you brought up that word, and I think that it ties in nicely with the concept of legacy. I mean, we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and at the pinnacle of all of that is contribution, and feeling that what we contribute towards has some sort of matter and meaning, which is why we all kind of feel driven towards it, even though we don't know. Yeah.
At the pinnacle, his term is self-actualization.
Mhm.
Okay, which you reinterpreted as contribution. And I love it, because think about even the concept of self. And there we are back to what is a human being rather than what is
Exactly.
being human. And if you say self-actualization, then what you're really looking at is I am we.
Yeah.
What is the version of me that is contributing to the well-being of we?
Yeah. So talk to us about that contribution.
In what sense, David? Give me an orientation here.
All right. So you said that you divided life roughly into three different stages.
Or
And
four if you live past 84.
all right. But you told us that when you cross like to the third stage, you start thinking more about that contribution kind of element. And if we think of,
Authenticity, what's worth
Mhm.
your time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what would a life that is based on contribution or thinking about more of we
Very good.
rather than I, what would it look like? And how would
Very,
that
very
help to build legacy?
Okay, good. Let me give you two examples from my life. Okay. One is that as a professional keynote speaker, trainer, consultant, author, I, as you know, spent a lot of time on airplanes,
Mhm.
which is great because you get up on stage, they give you the microphone, you do a great job, they love you, you get the applause, you get the check, you get on the business class flight, and you're out.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it's a lonely profession.
Mhm.
And everybody who's excellent in it experiences a certain degree of disconnection
Yeah.
from their home society, and sometimes even from their homes. And so 20 years ago, here in Singapore, I was one of the co-founders of a group called Asia Professional Speakers. And now we
Mhm.
have 350 members.
Mhm.
And this thing has become a real phenomenon. And it was created for three reasons. One is, let's find our colleagues.
Mhm.
Who else does this? I mean, I know a few of them, but there's got to be more. And then let's form a sense of community. And community has that sense of together and concern and commitment to one another. And then let's, as a group, define ourselves as improving our competence.
Mm.
I learn from you, you learn from me. Here comes some newbies, which is always happening. And the theme and the spirit of this association and other speaker associations around the world is educational support and encouragement
Mm.
for and with one another. Okay. So 7 years ago, the association surprised me and they gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Mm.
And it was funny because I like, what do you mean? Is it over? It was really, it was an awkward moment. Like, whoa, where's this thing coming from? Right. And they've since redefined it as the Hall of Fame. And every year somebody, gets added to it.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I realized, wow, this was actually historically impactful.
Mm.
Because it wasn't so much that they were honoring me as that there was an association saying, this is the way somebody in our field could perform and contribute in a way that we as a community want to say like that, so that other people have a North Star.
Mm.
The other example is super fun because it's completely different. My wife and we're not getting younger, maybe in spirit, but we're aging physically. And we're kind of looking like, where do we want to go and grow older and be safe?
Yeah.
And have a certain freedom domestically at home and So we're right now in the process of designing a house in Singapore.
Mm.
And originally we called it Create a Space to Age in Place. And I have this beautiful design brief. It's like 30 pages long with principles and concepts and what do we want to do? And then we started working with the architect and he said, but you got the title wrong. So what do you mean? He says, Create a Space to Thrive in Place.
Mm.
Oh, and all of a sudden, all of our ideas about farming on the roof, all of our ideas are being open to the community and having happy hours and block parties. All of a sudden, the idea of being ecologically sustainable and energy net positive and carbon neutral, and all of it took on a whole different sense that it wasn't just for our own safety and well-being, but it would be a communal activity, an engagement with the country, with the community, with the future.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I mean, that's, you can tell from just the way I'm describing it, how much pleasure we're getting because now it's not about us.
Yeah.
It's about we.
Amazing. So let me then ask you, what is your legacy going to be?
First part of it will be, he died. And, I think people are going to say there was a particularly enthusiastic, energetic, outgoing character who had a certain degree of creativity. He happened to have a gift to be able to present and speak well. He loved being with audiences and was always concerned about generating a sense of well-being and possibility with the people that he was with. And he had his foibles and his flaws, and he wasn't particularly humble. But, that was the guy. And let's read his book and talk about it with each other and see how it might apply in our own lives.
Absolutely. And I believe that part B can happen before part A. Because I do know there's a lot of people around the world who are reading your books and talking about it. And I know that with the new ones, especially Careology, that's got me really excited when that one comes out. I would think it would be absolutely amazing. And there will be a lot of people sitting around discussing it, probably on their podcasts and like, that guy, Ron, he's done some pretty cool things, and he's not dead yet. you're still there thriving. You're still there thriving. So because we want to be respectful of time, let's start bringing this in towards a close. Talk to my audience individually, those who might be in either one of the 3 or let's say 4 stages of life, who are thinking about their legacy, thinking about or maybe they're not even thinking about legacy. Maybe they're just tired of the self word. Maybe they're just tired of being wrapped up in, their own personal concerns, feeling like life is that sort of struggle against everybody else. You're struggling against all the people who are graduating from college, then you struggle against all the other people in the organization to get the promotion, and where you start your own business and you struggle with everybody in the market, and then you go home and you're like fighting with the Joneses to make sure you guys have your better houses or whatever it is. And then you get this exhaustion from just like always being on social media. And then it's so funny. There's like this phenomenon where we know everything about what's going on in the rest of the world, but we know nothing about our neighbors. we know nothing about the person down the street. Like you were saying, you have a grandmother at home. Maybe your neighbor has a grandmother and they can spend some time together. But everyone's got like opinions and thoughts about what's happening in this country and that country. And what is this current policy on this? But they have absolutely no idea about what goes on within their immediate circle. And so talk to anyone who is facing kind of that frustration, but who maybe is a little bit afraid of stepping out to build that trust with other people,
Right.
or reaching out to care or to serve. And how do they get the confidence to do that and to start doing it? And in doing it, what kind of impact can they expect to see in their lives?
Okay, that was not a small question there, David. I like it. Thank you. Let's start by saying that you are biological. You're a human being. And because of that, you necessarily have a family.
Yeah.
You couldn't get your body without one of those, of whatever sort it was. Yeah. Whoever was mom, dad, siblings, whatever. Those families only exist within communities, whether it's a neighborhood, whether it's work, whether it's the store, the shopping, whatever. And that only exists inside of a society. And the societies in which we live are in a certain moment in history,
Yeah.
in a certain era of ecology. Okay, that's like, okay, what is being human? Large sense. And you have language, and you're a moody creature. You're not going to be able to get away from that, so you may as well learn something about it. And you're mortal. Okay, so like, let's just get a sense of what's going on around here. Okay, if you're under 28, go give it a try. Take a risk. Learn more. Ask silly questions. Make an attempt. Get curious about things that you are curious about. Pursue them. Ask dumb questions. Ask good questions. Read more widely. Travel. Find the person you don't understand and say, "Do you mind if we just talk? I want to try to learn something about who you are and how you are," because that's what you're supposed to be doing. Figuring out what is this thing called life and what's going on around here.
Yeah.
Okay. When you get into that second stage and you want to generate value, and the reason you want to value generated is because it's always an exchange and you want to get value so that the value you get enables you to start that family, build that house, go on that vacation, buy that car, whatever it is, go to school, fund your parents' retirement if they haven't taken care of themselves in that way, whatever it might be, contribute to a nonprofit, Put your focus on what will contribute to the well-being of others. Because in that is what they value, and in that is the possibility of the actions that you might take that will create value. And the moment you do that for someone, there's going to be some form of exchange. It may not be one-to-one. It may be that you just feel great and you don't even realize that 2 months later, that person is going to refer you to somebody else, and then that's how life works, right?
Yeah.
So keep your attention, your focus on, yes, generating value, but recognizing that value is generated because you're contributing to someone's well-being. So be the person on the team that's thinking one level beyond the sales chart, one level beyond the P&L, beyond the performance, beyond the appraisal, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's the advice I would give there. When you get to that next stage of life and you're thinking about, okay, now what am I going to do with what's left here? Let's assume that you've developed a certain degree of maturity and that just being named global guru for 7 years in a row instead of 3, which is what it is. I'm young enough to still mention that on this podcast, by the way. Okay. It's like, no, that's not the point. Well, what is the point? That's a good point to think about. What is the point? Where is it that I, like an acupuncture needle, could do a more of an influential, potentially, maybe it's writing. Maybe it's standing for senior office. Maybe it's mentoring someone. Maybe it's going deeper into your community of younger people and helping those who made a mistake get a second chance. Whatever it might be, but find a way in which your contribution to the well-being of others contributes not just to their immediate well-being, that's value creation, but their future well-being as well. So you can have more of an influence in their longer term, because now you're living in a sense of longer term.
Well, that's powerful. So, but does it work though?
Does it work? Oh boy.
I mean, you're the
It's
expert. You've seen it in people's lives. So give us an example of how it works.
boy, I've seen it so many times. I mean, the most intimate personal example, of course, is my own.
Mm,
Just how my life. But let me talk about my wife, because I mentioned her at the very beginning, and we'll kind of wrap up with this amazing human being that I'm
mm,
gifted with having the pleasure of being married to. She grew up on a sheep farm,
mm,
okay, in Western Australia, and at a very young age went to work because that was one of the options for a farm girl back in that era in Western Australia. And so she never got university education. She never became an intellectual, but God, is she whip smart.
mhm,
So she has this, she can learn anything, which makes her a great conversational and life partner for me. But she also has this tremendous sense of grounded compassion
mm,
because she grew up on a farm. She knows what it's like to have a year where the harvest wasn't strong. She
mm.
knows what it means when there's an animal that, got born backwards, or, I mean, she under real life, as her dad says.
Yeah.
So as we're working on this house project, you can look at the planting, the landscape architecture.
Mhm,
And on one hand, the architects want it to look really cool and elegant. And I'm going, yeah, okay, maybe. and the people who are really into landscape, they want to use the exotic plant yeah, maybe. And she says, no, I want a farm, like a garden.
hmm.
I say, oh, a farm. She goes, a farm is 10,000 acres. Okay, not a farm. Like a garden. But to her, a garden is a place where you're either growing flowers, and
Mm,
so they're beautiful. But what do you do with the extra flowers? You cut them off and you give them to the neighbor. You take them down the street. You bring them to the old age home because it's
mm,
always going to keep generating more flowers than you could possibly consume in your house. So that's why you grow so many flowers. Oh, really? And what about the food edible garden? And I'm
mm.
going, well, like, how many tomato plants or strawberry plants do you need to feed us? That's not the point. How much can you grow? So then what are you going to do with all that? Well, you're going to be the person in the neighborhood who stimulates this sense of giving and cooking and sharing. And you know what? Heard a beautiful phrase. A home should be a homeopathic for the neighbor.
Mm.
Ooh, how different that is from behind my walls and close my door and pull the shades, or homeopathic for the neighborhood. And there's an example of someone at this point in her life who's manifesting herself as a contributor to
Mm.
the well-being of a much different, larger space with discoveries and conversation. We don't even know what's going to happen yet. We don't know who lives next door. But in
Amazing.
the years to come, we'll discover.
That's incredible. Your wife is awesome, and you are awesome too, Ron. Thanks so much for taking the time with us. Tell our listeners where they can find you and where do they start if they want to work with you.
Okay, so the website is ronkaufman.com. But if you just go to Google or Bing or whatever you may be using and type in my name, RonKaufman, and press enter. Okay, you're going to find me somewhere. YouTube's got hundreds and hundreds of videos, and obviously those are all free. You can follow on LinkedIn. We post there every single Monday to Friday. I've got this wonderful team that's generative and comes up with good things. And if you actually want to get in touch to learn how we could coordinate, work with each other, go to the website, and there's a form that says contact.
Mhm.
And I see what comes in, and there's a lot of free stuff on the site. So dive in, help yourself, and enjoy.
All right. So you heard that, everyone. Go dive in, help yourself, and enjoy. And we thank you for being here with us and participating in this conversation. Let's say a quick goodbye to Ron. Ron, thank you so much for your wisdom, your knowledge, and just your energy. And on behalf of all my listeners, I appreciate you for what you're doing for this world, and I appreciate you for what you've done for us on this conversation. And we look forward to having you again in some capacity. And to all my listeners, oh, go ahead.
David, let me just jump in and say then to you and to your listeners, if you wonder where did the guy get it, remember, I got all that energy from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thanks so much for joining us, all of you who gave us the energy for that conversation. We look forward to welcoming you back on another podcast episode. Until then, this is David Thurmer signing off. And on behalf of Ron and I, take care and go make your life amazing. Have a good day.
Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Please be sure to like and subscribe. David is always eager to hear from you and would love to work with you in a more personal way. For more information, please visit our website at www.davidthirimer.com. That's www.davidthirumur.com.